Hey guys, welcome to my March reading wrap-up where I read a ton of books. All the books I was holding up in the thumbnail picture are not even all the books. I had to bring a bunch back to the library. Yeah, I'll tell you at the end because I haven't actually done tally yet how many books it ends up being, but it's quite a few. So what I did for March is the same thing I've been kind of doing for the last few months, and that is I just filmed little clips as I finished books. That way I could talk about them as soon as I finished them and I could remember the things. So let's just get into all the clips. I'm sorry it's so long. Yesterday was the first day of March and I managed to finish a book, and then I get the idea in my head maybe I could read a book a day in March. And I guess maybe I'll know, you guys will know because I'll have a clip before this talking about my reading month overall. But as of this moment, I'm optimistic it might happen because we're 2 days in, I finished 2 books. So the first one is, let's just make this darker so you can actually see the cover. This Pride and Prejudice graphic novel. This is a Marvel retelling of the story, and unlike a lot of graphic novels, this has a lot of words. I mean, if you're going into it thinking like middle grade graphic novel, then you might be kind of disappointed. Lots of words. I have been reading a lot of Jane Austen lately, not really on purpose, it just kind of started, now it's snowballing. So I'm reading all sorts of Jane Austen, the original, the abridged, graphic novels, all the things. And I enjoyed this. I think I gave it 4 stars, and that's probably mostly just me and graphic novels. It was really well done. And then Nancy Butler is the person who adapted it. She has done other Jane Austen stories into these graphic novels, so I have requested the other ones. I don't think she's done all of them, but I'm gonna see. I think I requested all the ones my library had at least, and I will probably get to those throughout the month or very soon after. So this doesn't fit with March Mystery Madness or Middle Grade March, but I read that. And then a middle grade book that I have finished is Otter. I'm so glad I got to this. It wasn't on my TBR. I tried really hard in my TBR video to make it fit, and it just never fit any prompt, but I read it anyway. It is a free verse novel, so it's fast, and I kind of like to start, you know, the month off with a bunch of fast books. I'm going to show you some of these pictures in here. I mean, the cover is adorable. I mean, otters are just cute, so like that is, I mean, fairly easy to do, I think. And then there's like lots of like little illustrations, and then there's some bigger ones which are just all so cute because they're all otters. So she took some true stories of otters that live in the California, some area in California, Monterey Bay, around the aquarium kind of there. She found some true stories of animals that have been rehabilitated in the aquarium and kind of wrote a fictional story about it. It's adorable. I've always loved otters, and it's just so cute. So I gave this one 5 stars. Really enjoyed it. I like Catherine Applegate a lot. I don't think I've read any of her books that have disappointed me. She does a really good job with her stories. So that's it. That's 2 books in the beginning of the month. Obviously those are shorter ones, but I'm gonna have some longer ones throughout, and we'll see if I can do a book a day. Not surprisingly, with a 24-hour readathon going on, I finished 2 more books yesterday that I'm gonna update now, and then I'll probably update more either later today or tomorrow or something, because I'm sure I'm gonna finish more. So the first book I finished was, I'll move over so I can put up the cover, Evergreen Chase. This is a Shady Hollow short story. It's like a novella, and I read the first Shady Hollow book, I think maybe like January, December or something, and enjoyed it. It's a cozy mystery with woodland creatures. I mean, it does say at the beginning you have to like suspend belief a little bit because like the creatures are doing like human things, but still have a little bit of the characteristics of different woodland animals. And I did enjoy Shady Hollow. This Evergreen Chase though, it's set at Christmas. It's a Christmas story. Their town tree goes missing, their solstice tree. And it just wasn't very well written. It was too short. The suspects, the culprits were fairly obvious. I just felt like overall the writing was not up to par with the writing that the actual novel was, and I've only read the one book, so I don't know if it's gonna change in books 2 and 3 or not. I don't know. I wouldn't recommend reading that book. And then I finished one other ebook. It was a NetGalley ARC. It's called A Most Agreeable Murder. So I did talk about this a little bit during my 24-hour reading vlog. So it's a cozy Regency era mystery with, it takes a lot of nods from Pride and Prejudice. There are some lines that are like straight out of there. Let's see here. There are definitely some nods from Pride and Prejudice. It's very heavy on Pride and Prejudice. There's some more Jane Austen works. Don't attack my microphone. I think some like Charlotte Bronte stuff there. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's helpful. You're just gonna be annoying right there. But the book, it's set in this township called Swampshire, which is comprised of several lovely mansions and one disgusting swamp. This was the home, one of the mansions, not the swamp, of Beatrice Steele. So it's humorous. There is a lot of frog references due to this whole swamp thing, which it's a funny mystery, but sometimes they take it a little too far and it gets a little weird. But I laughed out loud and like snorted because I was trying not to laugh out loud multiple times throughout this book. And so like a lot of Regency era books, the focus is really on propriety and looking proper, and yeah, so our main character, she's obsessed with murders, and it's clear she's obsessed with solving them, not committing them, and she has to hide the fact that this is her hobby. And then lo and behold, a murder occurs one evening and she's trying to solve it. And there was so many good lines. Here's one of the ones that was from Pride and Prejudice. It is a fact known throughout Swampshire that a rich gentleman is prey hunted by every young woman. I highlighted so many lines from here. Okay, so this is our main character. Beatrice is trying to come across as a proper young woman. She says, "Of course, when selecting my reading material, I stick to the stories suitable for ladies." "How lovely! What are your favorites?" Beatrice cleared her throat. "Oh, I adore anything about women moving from one drawing room to another," she began, "and friendships between ponies and horses." She trailed off, but Mr. Croaksworth nodded vigorously. Yeah, no, she actually enjoys reading like the crime column in the newspaper. So it was very humorous, but there were some things like the whole, so there's Mr. Croaksworth, and they're in Swampshire, and there's a lot of comments about how many frogs live around there, and there's a few things that were like just a little too extreme on like the whole frog thing. And then her dad likes to commit like pranks, practical jokes, and he was like so not era like he had like a whoopee cushion that he created, and he thought it was funny to put it in places, and it's like that just felt a little off, but a lot of things about the book were funny. So that's my updates for now, and then we'll see when I can update next. I'm sure I'm going to finish at least a few more today. So I finished the 24-hour readathon yesterday, and I finished it late in the evening. Video will be up already. My brain was so full of taking in words that I couldn't talk about the books that I finished. So now I'm going to talk about all the books that I finished that I haven't talked about so far, which I should get my phone because I don't even remember which ones I finished. This morning in church I mentioned that I had done this readathon, and someone asked me what I had finished and my mind just went blank. So in no particular order, I read What About Will? I think I have that one here. This is a free verse novel by Ellen Hopkins. So this one and Closer to Nowhere are middle grade. Her other ones are YA or adult. I'm not sure if she's, because these ones are newer, I'm not sure if she's going into the middle grade now, but this was really well done. So I very incorrectly thought this was about a guy who comes back from from Vietnam. Okay, apparently my brain is still just not able to process things, and it's not historical fiction at all. What it is our main character, he is 12 and his brother has a brain injury from football and is struggling with a lot of the ramifications of that, headaches and things, and his brother is slowly getting addicted to drugs, or getting into drugs, and he doesn't know how much he should be speaking up, telling his dad what's going on, doesn't want to upset people, and so it's a lot of that. It's very well done. I enjoyed it. It makes me interested to read her YA books, because I think like almost all of them have to do with drugs and really heavy topics, drug addiction and stuff. So she handles it very well. So I'm curious to see how it is in the other books, because I think it's going to be grittier because it's YA and not middle grade, but probably very well done. So I read that. Then I picked up a graphic novel via Libby, Swim Team, because I joined in on Keisha's reading sprints that she was doing to break up the day a little bit, and she talked about Swim Team on there a little bit, and she mentioned these 2 pages that talk about why Black people are apparently stereotyped for not being able to swim, and it has to do with history and segregation, and like I didn't even think of this. I didn't know there was a stereotype that Black people can't swim. That must be like I'm assuming an American stereotype, but because of segregation and them not being allowed in the pools, that's why they can't swim. This was actually only like there was like 2 pages in the book that talk about this, unfortunately. I thought it would maybe have to do more with the history, but it just has to do with a girl that moves schools and then wants to get into the math club but can't. So the only thing that's available is swim club or swim class or something, and she doesn't know how to swim, and yeah, then it goes on from there. So it was okay. I just was thinking it was going to be something different. I think I gave it 4 stars. Not bad, just not what I was expecting. And then I read the Northanger Abbey graphic novel as well. That was during one of Keisha's earlier sprints. I was trying to read graphic novels during the sprints because she was doing, how was it? She had a readathon, graphic novel readathon. I can't remember the, Let's Get Graphic, I think is what they titled it, her and the others that were hosting it. So I read Northanger Abbey. This is the Marvel edition, just like the Pride and Prejudice, but this has a different illustrator. And you might not be able to tell as much from the cover, like yeah, different art styles. But whereas this art style on the inside this is very Marvel-esque, I think. Let's see if that will focus. You know, you get an idea there, right? Well, the art style of this is not my favorite. Oh my goodness. Let's see if I can find a page that really demonstrates. It's just, oh, it's not my art style. And like, I feel like this does not work well with Jane Austen's works either. I'll see if I can get that a little darker. Like, oh, there's some other pages too. The over-exaggerated expressions and things. Oh, I really did not like that. So I think the writing was well done. So Nancy Butler wrote the writing for this and Pride and Prejudice, and there's a couple Jane Austen books, a couple more that she has done, and the writing is done well, but the art style, oh. And I think this artist, actually it looks like there might be 2. One of them also did another one, I think maybe Emma. So I requested the other ones from the library, but I'm not a fan of the art style. Okay, what else did I finish? I already talked about this one, Nightlight. Pretty sure I did that one already. I finished in Myrtle Peril, so this is a Victorian middle grade historical mystery where Myrtle is being raised up to be a young lady of quality, and she is just really into solving murders. And of course they keep happening around her too. In this one, Myrtle's father actually gets his tonsils removed, so he is at a hospital for a lot of this book, and we're getting some insights into like Victorian medicine, which I think is fascinating because I love it when, you know, especially like you're not necessarily expecting with a mystery, middle grade mystery, to be taught a bunch of stuff, but I felt like I learned a lot, and this reminded or made me flash back to historical fiction I read last year for adults, the Surgeon's Daughter, I think it's called. about women in medicine. It just made me think of that. And yeah, I really enjoy this series. I really enjoy the footnotes always. Sometimes they're educational, sometimes they're just funny. So they're talking about this nameplate, and then this at the hospital, this guy's got the initials FRCS, which is Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, an even more exalted rank than member. Oh yes, and because there was one footnote for member where it said a few back here. This guy's initials were MRCS, Member of the Royal College of Surgeons, an advanced certification beyond mere physician. Evidently, they prefer to be called Mr. instead of Doctor, having achieved the royal stature of gentleman. Most people ignore this, which must be annoying. So it's like she's being witty, but she's also teaching us things. They're funny. I like the footnotes. I like Myrtle. I like how she goes about solving the mysteries. The audiobooks are great. They read the footnotes. I would recommend that. Okay, that is all I have in front of me. What else did I finish? I think that's it. I started a bunch, so I guess once I finish those, I will hop in here again. Now I gotta let my cat out of the room again. One more book down, Aggie Morton, Mystery Queen, The Seaside Corpse, book 4 in this series. I started this during the 24-hour reading vlog, but I did not finish it. But I always love the cast of characters here at the beginning of these books. All those characters. There's always 2 pages worth of characters. I love these illustrations. They're so cool. Like I love this. So I've been enjoying this series. This book is not my favorite of them. There were some funny parts. Okay, wait, why don't I talk about what this is? This is a middle grade mystery series set in like, what would be like the 30s maybe? It's when Agatha Christie is young, and our main character is Agatha Christie as a child, if she was coming across murders and trying to solve them as a child. And then her friend is a boy named Hector, who's modeled after Hercule Poirot, and her grandmother is Jane, Granny Jane. She's Miss Marple, which is great because you really couldn't have made, although that would be kind of fun. I was gonna say you couldn't have made Miss Marple as a young kid, but can you imagine like a young Miss Marple, like a girl that's like obsessed with knitting but also solving mysteries? Oh, that's another series I would like to happen actually. Okay, well that needs to happen. But anyway, they are going to a camp for a week or a few days. They are being dropped off. There is a dinosaur that has been uncovered. I think they're in Dorset, I believe, which is the place in England where I was a nanny. So I always love when that comes up. And they're at this camp and a body appears. There's always a body. I love the little like feet on the cover. And so of course they task themselves with trying to figure out what happened. And yeah, I still love the series. This was my least favorite. I'm still giving it 4 stars. I think this is my least favorite of the series though. It's so funny because these books, this series, these books are constantly being released at the same time, and there's a lot of the same themes. Even like characters match fairly well in here. I really enjoy both of these. I love the Agatha Christie vibes of this, but I think this one I enjoy a little bit more, at least certain aspects of it. So that is another book for the month. I think there's going to be a lot of books this month. I think I've actually finished, I'm close to finishing a couple more, so I'm sure I'll be back soon. Okay, I haven't been very good at updating lately. Maybe because I finished a bunch of short books. And the cat really doesn't like it when my door is closed. And now he was sitting so nicely and is gonna go meow at the door because I closed it. Yep, there it is. We'll see if I can ignore him. The first thing I did was I DNF'd this book, Keep Showing Up. This is by Karen Eman. I have read another one of her books and I really enjoyed it. I don't remember which one I read. This one is a marriage book and I think it was good, but I just didn't want to read it because it started out pretty much every chapter kind of talks about a hard time in her marriage, and then we go and like, you know, find some strategies for really ways to change yourself and depend on God and stuff like that. And I just feel like, I don't know, marriage is in a good space, and I didn't really want to read about people struggling in the marriage. Okay, I might just have to open the door. I guess I'll leave it partly open. So yeah, I just decided to quit it. I don't know, maybe I'll keep it and read it at some point. I think other people might get a lot out of it. So I decided to quit that. I read the first chapter, I think. Then I read a few different graphic novels. I saw this one on Keisha's, is it Keisha? I think she was reading this during the reading sprints when she was doing the 24-hour graphic novel readathon. This is Unfamiliar, and honestly, I saw the illustrations, and so I was intrigued. It's very cute. Very cute. It's about a girl who is a witch. She's a kitchen witch, and she buys a house and it's haunted. She doesn't know how to get rid of the creatures because she can only like do magical food things. And so it's about her getting to know people in the neighborhood and asking for their help. The story, not necessarily my favorite ever, but the illustrations were so cute. I had to see it through. So I read that. I'm also not really like a big fantasy reader, nor am I really a big graphic novel reader. Although this month I'm changing that and reading like all the graphic novels, I feel like. So this was okay. If your library has it, it might be worth checking out. But there's that. Then I read Abina and the Important Men, and so this is based on a true story of, they use the actual courtroom transcript from 1876, I think, in somewhere in Africa on the coast, on the western side of things. There was a woman who said she was a slave and was trying to get away from her, the man who had enslaved her, and this is based on an actual transcript, which after the graphic novel portion of it, then it actually does share the entire transcript of her time in the courtroom. Yeah, that's not very helpful. Can you move? Yeah, so this was okay. They specifically tried to keep it very true to the courtroom case, and it's done pretty well. It's a little dry, but it's hard when you're not trying to add things in and to make it more interesting. And then there's some more stuff in the back, which I think has to do with, there's a whole part 3 that has to do with like historical content and different things. I didn't read all of this. And then this part is what? Engaging Abina. I don't know what that is. So there's a lot here, and I read the graphic novel part and felt like I gleaned all that I wanted to from that. And then, sticking with the African vibes there, I finished Soldier Boy. So I started this one in my 24-hour readathon thing. This is based on a true story. The afterword is by the man that the story is based off of. His name is Ricky Richard Anywar, and he was abducted by the Lord's Resistance Army in 1989 as I don't know if he was 13 or 15-year-old, somewhere in there, and it talks about his 3-ish years as part of the Lord's Resistance Army. And I had, at the beginning bits, first few chapters, like I read a couple chapters and then, oh my goodness, this cat. Then I needed a break to read something that was not so heavy. It is very, very, very well written, but it is very heavy and hard and heartbreaking, but well done. And so Ricky ends up, years after he gets out of the Lord's Resistance Army, he forms, I think it's called Friends of the Orphans or something like that, and Friends of Orphans, which is a rehabilitation center for child soldiers or girls also that were in the LRA. And that is a topic I've always been very interested in, especially since we've been to Uganda. And yeah, it was so good, but like so very, very heavy. Oh yeah, I do recommend it if you can stomach it. It doesn't shy away from the atrocities. I don't think it made it like more graphic than it needed to, if that makes sense. I don't think everyone can stomach it, but if you can, it is well worth the read and the heartbreak, for sure. And I think that's all I've finished lately. The next book that I finished is Iceberg by Jennifer A. Nielsen. This is a middle grade book about the Titanic. And this just came out, I think, March 7th. And I almost never read books physically so quickly, like so close to their release dates. That almost never happens for me. But I did. And Jennifer A. Nielsen is a really good historical fiction. I mean, just a good writer. She has some that aren't historical fiction that I love as well. But her historical fiction is probably the best for middle grade, I would say. So in this one we follow, okay, I just barely finished this book. I forget her name already. Her name is Hazel. She ends up stowing away on the Titanic and she wants to be a journalist. And through the book, she, like, kind of right from the beginning when she gets on the Titanic, she kind of has this feeling, I guess you could put it down like as a premonition that something's gonna go wrong. And I did really enjoy the book, but the first half especially, she's looking to justify why she feels this way when, you know, it's an unsinkable ship. Why is she feeling like something's gonna go wrong? And I felt a little bit of anxiety reading the book because I know what goes wrong. And I wish there would have maybe been, I mean, we did get to see elements of the Titanic and stuff, but I wish we would have just been more like having fun, being ignorant, just so we could get like a look at the Titanic. At the same time, the way she did it, we got to see, like, we were slowly informed of how the Titanic was built and how it could be possibly susceptible to problems and sinking, even though it's unsinkable. There were a few red flags, and because of the way this was designed, we got to like learn all of that, which is good. It just, I probably would have taken it a different way, but then of course the ending is like super emotional because more than half of the people die, and she does a really good job with it. I just think I would have written it differently had I been writing it, but also I can't write, so I didn't. I wouldn't be able to do as good as she did. Yeah, so I will continue to read and buy all of her historical fiction, all of her books, really. Definitely recommend it, but I mean, I mean, it probably doesn't help that I was feeling really anxious this week to begin with. For some reason, no reason known to me, I was feeling anxious, and then so reading this book probably didn't help that at all, but still recommend it. I just came back from a walk. Definitely still winter out here. It's not terribly cold, but there's a lot of snow on the ground. So I finished a book right before my walk that I want to update you on, but I wanted to mention that today is the 12th of March, and I was going to check in here and see how many books I have read now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I've read 15 books, so I'm like totally on pace for this one book a month, ahead of it still, which is great because there might be some lagging days. I didn't really, okay, losing my voice. I didn't really think that was going to be possible, but it definitely seems like it. So the book I just finished is The Vanishing at Castle Moreau by Jamie Jo Wright. This book is coming out April 4th, and like all of her books, I highly recommend it. So we have mostly dual timeline. There's kind of three, but the one doesn't show up very much. In the one that doesn't show up very much, we are with a girl in 1801. Her father has just built this castle, and he doesn't seem to believe her when the girl who's 6 is saying that she's being visited by a woman with a crooked hand, and that's happening, I guess. And then we jump forward. I don't remember what the time period is for the next one. I think still in the 1800s. We're with a girl named Daisy, young woman, who has just responded to this ad to work as a maid, or so she thinks, in this same castle. And there's some suspicious things going on there. A girl has just disappeared around the castle, and another one kind of shows up injured, and then things happen. So there's that. And then present day, we are with Cleo, who's obviously running from something in her past, and she responds to an ad to work at Castle Moreau. She's helping this old lady who has pretty much become a hoarder, and she comes across the fact that there are vanishings that have happened around this castle back in the 1800s and kind of continuing, and some kind of in more recent years. And yeah, I won't say much. Jamie Jo Wright is really great at writing like a gothic story, having creepy vibes, but she is a Christian writer, and so everything is explainable. And I just love reading through her books and thinking like, how is she going to explain this? Because I don't really know. And then she does, and it's always really good. So I will continue to buy all her books. This one was an ARC because it hasn't come out yet, and definitely recommend it. So I technically only have 16 more books to read for the month, and I will hit one a day. That, yeah, might not happen. We'll see. I'm on a bit of a negative streak here. I think it's been a few days since I've updated, but I did finish one very short book, Wonder Cat Volume 2. This is like a manga book, but kind of like a comic book, and they're all different. Let's see if we can focus since it's so bright. They're just different little cat comics, really. Some of these are better than others. I feel like this page was very real, applicable if you are a cat owner. But a lot of this book, and same with like volume 1, the cat has like human characteristics, so it's a little unrealistic. It's not as relatable if he was just making cat comics, which, I mean, you could only do for so long, I feel like, before you would use all your ideas, but it's cute. It was a nice little palette cleanser while I'm finishing a bunch of bigger books. Like, I've started so many this month, so I'm finishing a bunch of bigger ones, but I did also DNF a book. I forget the title, so I'll put it up. I think it's, ooh, I don't remember. Whatever it's called, that one. I DNF'd it. I had the ARC, and I tried to read it. It's like middle grade, and I think it's supposed to be science fiction, but as far as there was no like blatant science fiction-ness yet. There's like these, I feel like as a middle grade you have to be a little bit more clear on what you're doing, and I didn't feel like it was. So yeah, I decided to quit that one. The only thing is I did learn that apparently 0.1% of boy-girl twins are actually identical, and you can look it up. It's actually a thing. I thought it wasn't possible, but it is. Crazy. Yeah, so I DNF'd that one, and I'll update again soon. This may end up going down as one of my favorite books of the month, My Lady Jane. I have no idea what I was thinking going into this, or like I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. So I talked about this a little bit in my attempt to kind of like write like Ella Montgomery / my books about books recommendations. This is a historical fiction with an alternate history element and a fantastical element. So it's got a lot going on, and I was really drawn into the cover because it's got all these different little, I don't know, snippets, which, I don't know, it was unique. And it was obviously historical fiction, but it was unique. So we start out with Edward, King Edward the 6th, I think he is, and he is dying, and he names Lady Jane Grey as his successor because Edward was trying to change England to be a Protestant country, and his sister Mary, who would have been next in line, is very much Catholic, and he wanted Jane, who was also Protestant, to continue the line. In this world, we don't really talk about Catholics and Protestants, but there are people who can change into animals, and I actually don't even know how to pronounce the word that they are, but Edward is one of those people that supports people that change into animals, and Mary is, I think it's called a Verity or something like that. She wants to kill everyone that turns into animals. So they're taking the Catholic and Protestant thing and they're making it fantastical. And the reason he wanted Lady Jane is because then she would keep it Protestant, but so obviously she's pro the fantastical animals, and people can't always help it when they change into these animals anyway. It was just very fascinating. When it first starts, they say Part 1 is in which we revise a bit of history, and then when you get to part 2, it's like in which we throw history out the window. And this book binding is pretty much shot. There were so many funny parts to this. The narrators, which I think is probably like the 3 authors are kind of like our narrators, they pop in every now and then with some more information, or they talk about how they're deviating from history or various things. And it was so funny. And then Lady Jane in this world is known to be a reader. She always has a bunch of books with her. I love those kind of references. She's right at the beginning of the book, she's reading the unabridged history of the beat in England, volume 5. And there's one part where she says, armies aren't very good about carrying libraries with them. I can't imagine why. We'd fight so much less if everyone would just sit down and read. So obviously as a bookish person, I appreciated like the bookish references, and this is a series that I'm going to continue. Even though it was kind of alternate history, it veered off at a point, plus then it had the fantastical element. This made me look up so much about the Tudors, and I just have gone on a total like learning binge as a result, and I love that. So this is definitely a YA book. With some of the content, so much of it I wish my daughter could read because it's hilarious and yet interesting, but there's some content that it will be a few years before I let her read this for sure, but otherwise I highly recommend this. I'm probably going to give it 5 stars. It was so much fun. And I think there's 3 books in this series, and then they have a series on Mary, and I'm not sure yet, I haven't looked it up. I don't know if that's Mary Edward's sister or if that's Mary Queen of Scots. It could be either. So probably Mary Queen of Scots actually, but I don't know. Yeah, definitely recommend this one. Today is the 19th. It's been a few days since I've updated, and my prediction now is that I'm not going to be able to read a book a day, because in order to do so, I would have to read a bunch of graphic novels, and I currently just don't feel like it. But I did finish another book. My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. So this was the book that I submitted for my in-person library book club for this month, and it's the one that won the draw, the random luck of the draw. And this one has been on my list of classics that I want to read before I die. I have a list of 50 of them. This is the first one I get to check off this year, even though my goal is 7 this year. I feel like I'm a little behind on that goal. First of all, before I actually talk about the book, I love this edition. These are the Virago Modern Classics editions. Yes, they're published by Virago Press, and I believe they're the Modern Classics editions. And I think almost all, or possibly all, of Daphne du Maurier's books are in this edition, and I kind of want to collect them all and have them on my shelf because I feel like that would be nice and pretty. It's a harder to open kind of hardback. It doesn't lie flat super well, but they're pretty, and so the rest of them are going on my wish list. Okay, so My Cousin Rachel. Back when I read Rebecca by her, that I think was really my first introduction to the gothic genre, subgenre, whatever it is, and I think I ended up giving Rebecca 3 stars right after I read it. But it was like a book that stuck with me, that within a year it was like a 5-star book in my brain. And now going into this knowing kind of what a gothic story is, I really enjoyed the book. So it's My Cousin Rachel. We follow a man named Philip, who he is the heir to an estate. I think it's his cousin, is this man named Ambrose, and Ambrose he's in his 40s, goes to Italy on a trip, ends up falling in love, getting married, and then Philip inherits his estate. Philip is 24, and I don't know what I can all say here. Philip receives a few letters from Ambrose that make the marriage with Rachel, which is who Ambrose marries, something's suspicious. So Philip is determined to hate her. And I think I'll leave like the actual explanation of the story there. but there are a lot of like the gothic elements, which if you're not big into gothic literature, I would just say is like this undertone of creepiness, and not in a scary way, just more in a like, people don't like, you kind of think they're not who they seem to be. Something is off. So it's not like I can't sleep at night kind of creepy, but just like there's something not right going on. And this book had those vibes. And now I'm so curious to reread Rebecca and see which one I like more. I think I'm giving this one 4 stars, but I'm so curious to know if after a while I'll rate it higher, like if it's one I'm going to be thinking of. There was one random quote that I wanted to share. It has really nothing to do with the book, and it will not be spoilery at all. Of course, I just have to find it. Well, if I find it, I will include it at the end of the video. There were like things I suspected that were going on in the story and stuff, and some things I was right about, some maybe not so much, but I enjoyed the story for what it was. So I'm excited to talk about this with my library book club, because my prediction is most people won't like it, but I could be wrong. I have The King's General by her, which I feel like I've never heard anyone talk about. It's just I found a really old copy somewhere. So I feel like that might be my next du Maurier that I read. Although I've heard good things about Jamaica Inn, but I don't own that one. So we'll see where I go from here. But I really did enjoy this in the way that she told the story, not necessarily in the story itself. It's kind of like my love for Wuthering Heights. It's not the story, it's the way it's written. So take that as you will. Before I update you on my next book, which is a good one, yesterday I found the quote that I wanted to read, and I tried to remember the page numbers, so assuming I did, I will read it to you. I, as an introvert, really loved this quote. Okay, so Rachel's actually quoting Ambrose here. She says, this is very important: "It was worth the tedium of visitors to experience the pleasure of their going." That is a quote that I find hilarious as an introvert. So that's what I wanted to read when I updated that. And then I finished another book last night. I finished The Grave Thief. This one I got sent to me by, well, the author asked me if she could send a copy, and then I think Penguin Random House Canada sent it to me a while ago, and finally got to it. This is a cover that I've been like drooling over for a while. I feel like it's so cool. I just love the illustrations, and thankfully the book ended up being as good as the cover. So this is a middle grade fantasy book where our main character is a boy named Spade. His family are grave thieves, which, you know, that would be a creepy job. So he does that. He is the digger and the finder of the things in the graves, while his brother keeps watch, as does his trusty raven Ash. And him and his brother get caught trying to rob a royal grave. They get caught by the royal guards, and to kind of pay off his debt. Always a cat. Yeah, you can come. He's just gonna lie in the middle of the floor and meow at me. To pay off his debt, he has to become a royal spy. There is a creature, I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's a wogan that is it's kind of eating people in the area, and he is supposed to hunt it down and kill it, or figure out its weakness or something. And so that's what the book is about. So middle grade fantasy. I actually just bought the audiobook for my son, who has a cold, in case you can hear him coughing in the background. That's what's going on. And the audiobook sounds, from the sample, sounds amazing, because I think he'll really enjoy it. I think it could be a little creepy for some middle graders. I would probably say ages 9 and up I would recommend it for, or 8 and up, just because the wogan is like it's kind of like a mist, like a dark thing with tendrils, and it sounds a little creepy. So some kids might find that a bit creepy, I don't know. But I just wanted to throw that out there as well. But it's really good. I liked the themes of honesty and loyalty and friendship. Some really great themes. Very excited to see if this author does any more writing, because she is a homeschooler and Canadian and a Christian. So like that's really cool. So I would love to read more from her, especially after reading this. I definitely recommend it, and I'm not just saying that because I got a copy for free. I think the cat needs his own YouTube channel because he just tries to take over mine. I just got home from running some errands. Got a white hot chocolate from Starbucks. Really good with almond milk. If I was making it myself, I would use cashew. They don't use cashew, they do oat or almond. But I really enjoy that. It was free thanks to my library because I won a gift card from there. Anyway, let's move on to the book. I actually am DNFing Point of Danger. This is my first Irene Hannon, wanted to give her a try, and this one was just a no-go for me for a few different reasons. The first, well, okay, maybe I'll just tell you. So it's about a radio talk show host. Her name is Eve. She has a pot-stirring on-air commentary, and she is very strong in her conservative views, which they didn't really go in depth into her views at all, except there was like one really good segment where she was very strongly defending the pro-life stance, and I'm definitely very pro-life. In high school, I wore a lot of pro-life shirts. As someone that is a product of teenage parents, I often think about how easily I could not have been around. But so it doesn't really get much into her views. I ended up quitting it right after chapter 8 because there's 2 points of view throughout the book that I was not liking. One in particular, the one that I was like, I think I could see that it was going to go in a good direction. Maybe it was this man who'd been married for a while, quite some time, and he was kind of like flirting with this other girl. Nothing had happened yet, but like he was thinking about it and he was aware, and yeah, that's not cool. I'm hoping he doesn't end up cheating on his wife completely, but yeah, I didn't want to read about that. And then there was another point of view, which was a man who, I think they'd been married for like a year and a half, and it was very much an emotional abuse situation. He was an emotional abuser, and his wife is another one of our perspectives. And I think it's good to talk about hard subjects in books, and I think it was well done in her view, being the victim of the abuse, but I didn't really want to read from the viewpoint of the abuser and his justifications. That's what ended up making me quit the book. I had quite a few things tabbed, most of which I wasn't really liking, different things that I wasn't liking. Saw the red flags of the abuser when we were in his wife's point of view, and then once we got into his, I was just like, no, I can't do that. So unfortunately I'm going to quit this and pick up a different book, I guess. Let's talk middle grade books. I'm struggling with them this month. How many have I read that I've enjoyed? 3, maybe 4? 4. Okay, that's not terrible, but it's middle grade March. I wanted to read more, and I just quit them because they're not interesting me. So I got a book from the library. It was called Winterkill. It sounded like an interesting premise because it had to do with like Stalin and Ukraine and something I've never really read about. But I didn't get very far in that, and it just wasn't capturing my attention. And then this one is a well-loved booktube book, middle grade book, and I quit this one too. Amal Unbound. I was about halfway through. This one is about a Pakistani girl who I think she wants more education. She wants to go to school. She wants to be a teacher, but she has to stay home and work. And it was missing an element of interest to me. I still think it would be like a good book for middle grade. It just wasn't capturing my attention as an adult. It felt like it needed something more. And I know that's a very unpopular opinion. I could have finished it. I was about halfway through, and then I felt like it was putting me in a reading slump, and that's not worth it to me. So I don't know if I'm going to scrap the rest of my TBR. I'm kind of feeling like I'm going to. Don't know what I'm going to pick up next. So I guess we'll just see when I wrap up the next book. So it turns out that thing I said about not being in the mood for middle grade books was not true. What I'm in the mood for is funny books, even if they're middle grade. And I just finished Dead City. This is a book that my daughter has wanted me to read for a while, and I'm so glad I finally picked it up. Of course, now my voice is working against me. In this book, we follow a girl named Molly. She is starting at this exclusive school, has never had a whole lot of friends, and she finds out that there's such a thing as zombies, and she is on a team to kind of fight against them. And I've only ever read one other zombie book slash duology, and that was last month, I think. And apparently I like zombie stories. What I really like about this book is the author's humor. So many laugh out loud moments that I had to read out loud to my entire family. The ones who cared and the ones who didn't. First of all, normally I don't like chapter titles, but these ones were all great. The title of the prologue is, you're probably wondering why there's a dead body in the bathroom. Let's see what else we got for titles. Okay, maybe they're not all funny, but how to set a trap. I like it when chapter titles don't spoil things, which so often I feel like they do. If you've ever wanted to know a good place to meet zombies, things you should never touch in a subway tunnel, and other lessons. So I like that. Plus the prologue starts out, I hate zombies. I know that sounds prejudiced. I'm sure some zombies aren't really nice to kittens and love their parents, but it's been my experience that most are not the kind of people you want sending you friend requests. And so, yeah, I think this is a trilogy. I think there's 3 books in the series. That's how many we own. I'm not sure if he's still writing more. I don't think so. So we follow Molly as she learns about zombies and stuff. I know it sounds so weird, but it is so laugh out loud funny. And my daughter is currently borrowing book 2 to her friend, and I'm curious. I think we're gonna get it back tomorrow. I might read that one right away. And I never read a series in a row, pretty much. So if I get that book physically, that might be my next one. We'll have to see. But I cruised through this. I read it in less than 24 hours. And there wasn't even a whole lot of like sit down reading time in those 24 hours. A lot of fun. If you're looking for something funny, I recommend this for sure. Different day, same shirt. I just want to quickly come on because I forgot, because I was reading an ebook, and if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget. I finished, well, did I finish? I didn't read like the last 10% of The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, whatever that says there. Oh man, this is one of those books where if it would have started like it ended, I would have DNF'd it, but because it started out really good, I read it, most of it. I marked it as read. It was like mostly read. It's more disappointing because I got excited about it, I wasted time. Anyway, it is a Victorian Regency something book that is coming out or just came out. I got it from NetGalley. I was very excited. It had gothic vibes. And I started it when I was reading My Cousin Rachel, but I had to pause it because they felt too similar. The first half of the book was really good, gothic vibes, really liking it. Second half, the author kind of like was like, oh, I'm going in this direction, and our character just did not act time appropriate, and I didn't like where things were going, and honestly, yeah, I didn't read the last few percent, and it just feels like a waste of time. And I think I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads, but the first part was so good, I was so excited, and it makes it worse when it goes downhill, and I really didn't like where things went and how our main character changed so much. That was, yeah, wouldn't recommend it. So there was that one. Another book down, I finished the Blackout book club last night. This is by Amy Lynn Green, and it is a World War II historical fiction book about a book club that bonds people together. We have 4 main points of view, 4 different ladies that end up joining this book club that kind of come from quite different backgrounds. We've got a married woman who's been married just for a few years, an elderly spinster. So the married woman ends up running the library. That's what it is. The spinster is the owner because this is a private library. Then we've got a woman who has 2 kids, and her and this other lady, the other 4th point of view, work in some kind of factory, and the one lady is single, the one lady has 2 kids. It was a little bit much at the beginning because in the first chapter we are introduced to all 4 of these characters, but they do have very distinct personal lives and personalities, so it's pretty quick to figure out like who's who. There were a number of things I enjoyed about this book. The whole point of starting the book club was because the person who was running the library, she wanted the library to continue, but the elderly lady wanted to close it to open a childcare center for women who were like working in the factory and helping with the war effort and stuff. And this is set in the US. I really did enjoy the book. I gave it 4 stars, but this is a Bethany House book, and this is the first one by them that I've read where there's like almost no faith element whatsoever. The one lady has a crucifix and kind of alludes to, well, she says once she wants to go to mass, and there was like lots of opportunities for really good faith conversations and they didn't occur. And that kind of stuff bothers me. I do judge Christian books harsher. Like, I have a more rigorous scale, I guess, for them, because if you are a Christian fiction publisher, there should be something Christian about your book, in my opinion, and I don't feel like this had it. If this was a secular book, I think it probably would have been like 5 stars for me. Maybe not. I didn't love all the characters, but this is quite a mashup of like the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society and the London Bookshop, especially since our librarian doesn't start out liking books. But there is lots of good bookish references because they take notes, they take minutes from every different book club that they have, and so it talks about the different books that they're reading, and at the end there is a big list. My kids are upstairs, it sounds like chaos. I think they're playing with a cat. Yeah, in the back there's lists of books mentioned and stuff if you want to go back and read them. So I enjoyed it, but it fell a little bit short of what I was hoping for, but that's okay. Still enjoyed it, and that's another one for the stack. I have no idea how many books I've read this month already, but quite a few. I have 2 really short ebooks to update on that I finished. The first one is, I forget the title, I think it's called The Voice of God by, I'll put it up because I don't remember. This one, I think they're both, well, it's hard to tell because they're ebooks. I think they're like right around the 150 page mark, at least in the copies / books that I was reading online. So they're really short. The Voice of God, I picked this one up because I listened to the Walk in Love podcast, and I'm behind in episodes of the podcast, and they were going through the book at the beginning of the year, a couple chapters for each episode, so I wanted to check it out. And I don't know how to say this. I didn't really enjoy the book. I haven't rated it on Goodreads as of right now. I have to figure out what I'm going to rate it. It's got like 8 different emotions. Apparently we experience 8 different emotions, and things that we call emotions often aren't. They fall underneath or stem from one of these emotions. And I think it has some interesting points, but it's supposed to be from a biblical perspective, and it just felt really lacking in the whole biblical perspective area. But that all being said, I'm getting a whole lot more out of the podcast and their conversations about the book than I did from the book. So I would say skip the book, just listen to the podcast, personally. So there was that one, and then I just finished Parnassus on Wheels. This is a classic that I meant to look up the publication date. I heard about this one through Shatona Havig's Parnassus on Wheels. Her Bookstrings series talks about it, and what's the publication date? 1917. It does not read as it's that old. Okay, that's kind of cool. So it was from the Bookstrings series. The one cat, I think, is named Parnassus because of this book. And right at the beginning of the book, this guy shows up at this farm where this lady lives. So our narrator is this lady. She's 40, I think, and she lives with her brother, who has become a writer, quite a well-known writer in the last few years. They're on their farm, and she's annoyed at him because he keeps going off on these adventures to write his stories, or like to have stuff to write for his stories, but he's leaving the farm with her. And this guy pulls up on the yard with a wagon that is a bookshop pulled by a horse, and he wants to sell it to her brother because he likes her brother's writings. And she's like, no, he can't leave again. Like, I will not allow you to sell this to him. So she decides she's gonna buy it so her brother can't. And then she goes on this wagon, this traveling bookstore, and the story is her adventures. And it was so much fun. It was so much fun. There is a second book in the series called The Haunted Bookshop, which my library doesn't have, so I'm gonna figure out how to get my hands on, and I'm definitely gonna read as well. What a fun read. It mentions a lot of different books because they're like trying to sell books to people, and it really does not read as though it is from 1917. Interesting. Definitely recommend reading that, and then hopefully the second one is just as good. So according to my Goodreads number, I ended up reading 25 books and DNFing 2. I don't think that's quite right. I think I probably forgot to put some on Goodreads, but it was a lot. The only thing is, one of the cards for the month was that I was supposed to read a non-fiction book set in Africa, and I requested this book. This is the book I thought I was going to read, Cry the Beloved Country. So when I talked about it in my TBR, it turns out this is actually fiction. So on my March TBR video, I got recommended Left to Tell from Karina, and she really highly recommended this book. So I'm going to read this one in April, and that will be the non-fiction book set in Africa that I read. This has to do with the Rwandan genocide, and so I'm very curious about it, but I didn't get that read because it's just barely came in from the library. So there's that. I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. I don't want to ramble anymore because I know that this is going to be a long video. So thank you to all who stayed through to the end. I appreciate you guys so much. Let me know some of your favorite books that you read this month.